This is IBM Museum. I'm back with another one of my NCR systems, and I wanted to take just a overview look at it. I had the intent of actually getting what the equivalent is for the reference diskette for this model, or the configuration diskette. I do have some diskettes paired with my other NCR units, but not this one apparently. And I wanted to kind of look at the front, look at the back, um, and then to open it up to show the insides, and just to see what kind of real-time clock it has, what that battery is, and typically with the NCRs, that's been the Dallas module. I was prepared on that side. I had a module all prepped up and everything else, but I only have a 16-bit system on hand right now at this location with a diskette drive, and even though I have diskettes and everything else, so I don't really have a mechanism for the NCR files, which are in a different executable format that the 64-bit Windows won't run. But we'll get to that. We'll get to the point where I can have one of those reference diskettes made up for this level of machine. And there's a few choices. I'll go through and I'll link to where those files are. An easy way to find them, as long as you know the model number of your NCR system. And there was a great follow-up comment that figured it out. I forgot to go through and reveal in the prior video of NCR, meaning National Cash Register. They were affiliated with, one of the aspects to their business is that they worked with cash registers. What the heck are those things? at retail locations, they supplied cash registers for retail stores. Very big name back in that day. But there was a quick comment on the video, I think probably the first one within minutes, and he knew the answer, of course. Let's go through, and I'm going to go off screen. I'm still using my webcam. I'm aware that it really just doesn't give a terribly optimal picture, but it allows me to put together a quick video and get up, and I'll have to look at a little bit more of something that maybe can do a HD quality that I can just get HDMI output out, and be able to have that as an input for a webcam, in the cases of the Skycam, or just a camera that I can easily set up to give a view of the aspects I need to do. That's going to be the resolution and autofocus really good and everything else. But let me go through. I'm gonna get off camera here and turn this in around. We'll look at the back as well after we're done looking at the front, and then we are going to open it up and look at the insides. Okay, and on the front here, this is a very clean unit. Nice little orange power button there. 1.44 megabyte diskette drive that's here on the front panel, and this really doesn't have any other 5 1/4. It doesn't have a 5 1/4 bay in the first part, and even this 3.5-inch bay here, and these are even a little bit taller bezels. It's probably pretty hard to find something like that. It might even have the hard drive behind this. We'll see once we open it up. Of course, it's got some indicator lights on the front, probably power and hard drive. And this is, as it is, NCR PC 386SX-20. And let's go through and rotate this thing around. Of course, it's got the key lock on the front. I should have marked out my location on camera to get a good view of the back to get it in position. Power. This is the really interesting thing. It has the iconized keyboard and even a mouse, and I think that looks visible enough. We'll probably have a close-up picture I can provide, or if it was a higher resolution camera, that would show that up a little bit better. But that's just interesting for the NCRs. They all seem to have those icons of the mouse and keyboard. Of course, the fan here, probably some sort of power supply. We'll see once we get it open. 25-pin serial port, 25-pin parallel port, high density 50-pin SCSI connection that's built into the planar, and a video VGA connection that's also built into the planar. And as we can see here, the 4 slots, classic microchannel with a thumb screw at the bottom for those positions. And as I say, NCR does a little bit different, that these are metal, and they actually go on a thread, and sometimes they get out of position. I think this one, the end, is a little bit out of position. I may need to see if I can to where it'll thread again or something else to hold this down. And this is just a board that I received with this unit. Looks like a ThickNet or some other thing with just a BNC connector. Probably, I don't think that coax connection is any kind of 3270 board, but we'll see once we get inside this particular unit. And at least this one has the label on the back. Some of the NCR models have this label actually on the underside of the computer, so it's really kind of hard, underside of the case, to see sometimes on what model, just looking at the top and the sides of what it is. Now this is a 3421, and I'll actually give a link. Since I can do that browser capture and that kind of that scroll function, I'll show the where the files are for those diskettes, the software. Quite a bit of software actually available for these units, and that's lucky that that's kind of cached away on known sources that I know will keep it safe and available. I don't know where that is on the core memory site that covers .com that covers the NCR units, but at least it looks like all the files for this. Now on this unit, the 3421, it's these Phillips-based screws, and it looks like a pretty conventional thread. I mean, it's a more of a domed screw than what you see with the clone cases, the hex head top, that you can use a driver rather than a screwdriver, than a Phillips screwdriver. And a lot of the models like this that are big, the higher end units, actually have metal thumb screws for the back of these positions to affix the case. And I wanted to, and I'll get up for a kind of a sky view as well, but I kind of wanted to show, and I don't know if I'll probably, before I move in for the SkyCam view, I'll probably do, there's a little bit tucked away here that I kind of wanted to show that is not necessarily visible for SkyCam. So let's actually see if we can do the one aspect that I kind of was aware of, and that is There are some SIM slots back here, and it's underneath a metal piece, and so that's not really visible for the SkyCam. So I wanted to show this aspect first before I went into that SkyCam view. We'll see if we can get a close-up. I only have one of these modules in place. And again, I don't want to bust any plastic. It's got plastic retaining tabs. Let's come out the side is an easier way. And that is a SIM module. I mean, I would have to go through and count pins and everything else and kind of look at whatever pinout. I mean, it's luckily it's conventional enough of chips, but I only have one of these modules. I don't have an idea unless I get on my reading glasses and maybe look at this. Ooh, bump the camera. Oh, and this is actually a Cumulus. It says CU SIM NCR, and it's got part number 8020273. Cumulus Corporation, 1990. Cumulus is ones that did make microchannel adapters and affiliated kind of the memory sides on PS2s as well. I get some glare off of that for certain angles. But you ever want to talk proprietary memory, that's what we're probably referring to right there. And with just me having one of these modules, that's going to be kind of messy. It looks like, yeah, the chips on here look like 404256. They're 80 nanosecond chips. So this might even be along the lines of just a megabyte or two. I think looks about like 2 megabyte maybe with the chip composition with that, with the parity chips being here in the center. So not a whole bunch of memory. And when we get up to the SkyCam, I need to take a close-up picture of that sometime when I pull it out too. Okay, get that back latched into position, and let's get into a SkyCam view here. Okay, and I knew that was going to take a little bit of time to get the SkyCam set up, but here's a good view, and of course the back of the unit towards me, and the power supply on this edge. We've got our microchannel slots here. We've got that board in there, and it even has a label on the tab, metallic label, property of Capital Federal Savings. And that actually does look like maybe even some form of a 3270 adapter. It's got some of the microchannel interface components here. Or it could be some sort of baseband made in Hong Kong. And And it even looks like, amazingly, some of the chips there, it's got labels on there, 9.3. I don't know if that, I don't think that specifies a date code. But I can go through and look up at some point and find out what that board actually is and the property of Capital Federal Savings. I don't know if they're still using a mainframe or whatever else to do their financial data in this day and age, and have 3270 terminals that are linked in. But you know, certainly I could maybe give them the adapter back. I'm not going to give them the system back. I don't know how long I've had this system. And the SIM I pulled out of there. It's below that metal, and NCR does this as well, that they have the just a piece of metal with the grooves for the microchannel slots. We've got the 3 conventional microchannel slots, including the one that I pulled the adapter out of, and then this AVE connector. And the other day I was going through and even trying to count pins on either end of this for a reason. We have some people that kind of know why that is. We've got the BIOS, and that's another interesting aspect, because I can show the page at the end of this, but it has even some BIOS files to go through and put on there. And this is marked, this BIOS chip, the EEPROM chip, is marked as version 1.01.00. And then it looks like it has a checksum that has a part number, and then a copyright date of, looks like NCR 1991. I know the camera is not going to give that quality of view to it. Really, at this distance, me looking over the camera, I don't really see all that much detail that's really showing for you guys. I apologize. This is not a microchannel slot. This model with the 386SX CPU, and that's probably 20 megahertz by the marking that's on the front. I'd have to look up close on that CPU as well. But there was supposedly a 46 upgrade board, and that's shown among the that has a different BIOS according to this, that of a card that's plugged in there to upgrade the CPU. And then, of course, the coprocessor socket. There is a SCSI connection here on the planar, and some chipsets by NCR for running that SCSI chipset. So ultimately, that planar resource is probably just an adapter that's mainly on a SCSI adapter that's on the planar. As I said, NCR made chipsets, and third-party companies use them for their SCSI adapters that were conventional microchannel or even other bus interfaces. This chip here, I'll have to look at the identifier when I do maybe some close-up photos. That seems to have a lot of space around it. It actually got some pin connections here, and I'd even have to look at what that might be possibly. Oh, and it does have, and that's not really, well, I guess it's viewable enough on camera. It does have some planar memory there as well. So I don't know what the total of what this system has. And of course, the 386SX CPU has a limitation of just that 16 megabytes of physical extended RAM on the board, and seeing how just the one SIM is present and probably impossible to locate more, the best thing, I'd probably have like a Kingston 609 board or something like that with memory if I ever wanted to go up to close to that 16 megabyte limit. Now the system I showed the other day with those boards with all that extended bus connection on it, and I had a colleague that said that it's probably just memory, and I was of the mind that when I had the systems fired up years ago that it was just a memory related sort of adapter as well, but I know it had a bunch of RAM on that board. Those systems I think were able to go up to like 256 megabytes, I think is the, and both of the systems I had the 4 boards on them, and those may have been even 64 megabyte per board, I don't know. And I'm just trying to rotate that a little bit out of the way, the drive carriage. I guess I could. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that are tying that down to the planar. And just see how easy power, floppy disk or diskette drive, and SCSI. Man, I do not want to. That. Oh, good thing I felt, because that insulation displacement connector, that 50-pin internal connection, yeah, it actually has, and of course the diskette drive doesn't, at least, because it came off real easy, but these, it has latches. So as an overview, somebody else has the system and kind of this teardown process, feel around for the latches on that SCSI connection. And as you can see, this, and most of it's on camera, probably slide that over a little bit more, just so we have just about nearly all of that on camera. It looks very much like a Model 50 power supply. It doesn't even have a fan off the side like the Model 70. And I'd even have to look. I mean, there is components in there. I don't even see how they could have a fan. They have ventilation holes. This back side is fully metal. It's not even, doesn't even have ventilation holes in it. So I even have to see if there's I don't see any other representation of a fan except what's on the back of the drive carrier. And that doesn't even have a cowling or anything else that would take necessarily to pull air through from the power supply. So hopefully that power supply is designed enough to where heat is not an issue. And we expose beneath, and of course the Dallas module. And I'll go through and I'll run the system. I would expect that battery would be expended by now, even for the time. And yeah, it looks like it has a relatively late 1990 date code, 9042. So probably the 42nd week of 1990. And so I'll come up with some harness otherwise, like some unit like this. When I replace that, and it looks like it'll have those battery leads on the far side, and I might have that come up through the drive carrier or position somewhere in the unit. Very similar. I did this one for a Model 3086 style planer, just to put that on a short lead and be able to get that battery holder. And of course I would go through and cover anything with tape, electrical tape, for exposed leads like that, like the positive pin for the battery when I put that into service. And that's just how I modify things. Probably not really very visible that of me soldering leads, but I also disconnected the internal battery on this negative side of the kind of the assembly line that I go through with these, grinding the grooves with the Dremel, and then drilling in with a small bit to disconnect the negative side of the battery, the internal battery, and then solder on those leads to have something. And with the power supply having that edge connector, as I say, this looks very similar to the equivalent of a Model 50 in that sense, and with certainly with the 16-bit microchannel slots, it doesn't have a like the Model 50Z, has the 4 slot is used for the DBA ESDI controller, the hard drive. The regular 50 is an MFM drive that is relatively proprietary, and they kind of have an internal slot of microchannel, 16-bit microchannel, that's more on board for their drive platform coming down here, and the drive, hard drive and diskette drives being on a platform above, on that drive platform above. But this is very similar in a layout to kind of the Model 50 or 50Z style in that, and even has that drive connector lead off the planer. And again, I'm amazed, and this has even got the same thing of those diskette drive that is conventional, has a 32-pin data connection, but has even a second diskette drive. It's marked BP4. This is like BP1. So I'm kind of pinned on, and these wires just being so thin, I'm just amazed. And that single Molex connection coming off the planer and providing power to both the SCSI hard drive and the diskette drive. And so, being that it's got a SCSI hard drive on it, I mean, that's better than what the Model 50 or 50Z would have had. And also just a little bit up on the 386SX at 20 megahertz too. A little bit better performance, of course, than a 286. But I'm going to go through and I'll put the drive carrier back in place. This is a keyboard controller chip, and that's socketed. It's got the terminators for the there's actually sockets that those terminator resistor packs are put into for the SCSI. Real nice. And that's probably for the external side of the SCSI bus, going through and terminating that, since there's not anything connected externally. I don't know if those would have to be removed if you have an external device that's terminated otherwise. Probably likely, since they're socketed like that. And this even looks like it has a little bit of memory chips down here. This might be something the equivalent of a cache for the SCSI interface. kind of like the IBM version of the IBM SCSI with cache, or what's called the Spock controller from IBM. It's 32-bit microchannel, and it could possibly be with the 386 SX of even like a bus mastering or some other potential there, just to get these cables free. Even beyond that power supply, beyond powering, and like I say, there's the other diskette drive connection, and then it's got another Molex connector for another hard drive, although it doesn't necessarily look like the drive cage could contain that. And you could go through and do maybe like a solid state interface, like the SCSI 2 SD might be fairly interesting solid state board to try with these, and not necessarily being worried that it's not really a fast responding solid state board on the higher end systems that actually have SCSI from IBM. I mean, that can be a rather poor performance, but for this level machine, that might actually work quite well and be a nice way to have SCSI interface storage on this system. So I didn't notice how the SkyCam was just bobbing around a little bit. So that's a little bit of the overview of this system. I've got everything latched back in place, and would go through and pull it out once again once it comes time where I've got to replace that, pop in that Dallas module, and then modify that one that I take out of there for another system. But I'll get in with that once I have a reference diskette, and probably even have just a short video on that as well. So I'm going to pause things. I'm actually going to get that page up that I was talking about. We'll go through and review that as a last step, and just go from there. Okay, I'm back in view here, and here is the page of information I'm talking about. I'll go through and link where that is, and as you can see here, the talks about the reference diskettes for the 3421 with the i486 upgrade board. It does even list a particular BIOS version that's required for that update, and interesting enough, that's a lower version or of that BIOS than what I guess would be normal for that. If you have just the factory CPU in there, the 386SX-20 megahertz. And then, so lower later on, you can see these are that executable format. I'll actually have to figure out how that executable, it spans that. If it's very similar, kind of a screen setup that it takes you through, full screen, that when you run it from DOS, of going through and accepting a license agreement and all that. But we don't have these stored as image files like quite a bit of the PS2 reference diskette, starter diskette, option diskettes, where I can use a conversion utility on 64-bit Windows to extract that image to a diskette without running some executable here. Now, going through and scrolling through. I think some of the files down toward the bottom are more generic for other NCR models or cover other NCR models. It's got some diagnostic and user files at the top there. Software support disk, 1 of 1. Binary code file to make BIOS version 2 for the 3421. Is only useful if you have an EEPROM burner. Well, I have an EEPROM burner, so that might even be an interesting thing later on, is to come up with that version 2 and burn that to an EEPROM. And I've got to really get some of those on order. I've been kind of delaying, and I need to actually get a list because there's a number of EEPROMs that I need to get on order so I can go through and program up. I think we're looking for that kind of right there in the middle, that 3421 reference diskette, 1 of 1, version 2 for that as well. And then we get into some of the device drivers, even for the video and everything else under OS2. Even different versions of OS2. The SCSI drivers. And then more OS2 drivers. JAS 16, install, update. PMP BIOS support. I don't even know if that's applicable to this particular model. But we get to see some of the NCR chipsets listed there. DOS CD-ROM driver for SCSI 2 devices. Excuse me, SCSI 2 devices. For, I guess, an external CD-ROM, since there's not that bay available for it. But all kinds of neato files that are cached away. I'll link that, and for where that's at. But we'll get further on likely a later video for me getting in there and replacing that module and going through and with that diskette to configure the system and kind of see, might check out a little bit of basic performance from there. And I don't know what's on that hard drive at all too. And that's back in the day and age where companies didn't necessarily wipe the data off. They who could ever be interested in something like that sort of thing. And of course, at least it's a little bit out of date for all that now, but it might be interesting to explore all that. And I don't know, for some of the NCR models I have, I've got diskettes. I know that I went through and I worked with them or configured them a little bit at that time. But this one, I don't have a related diskette. I don't necessarily think that I've ever started this thing up from whatever point that I acquired it. And I might even look online just to kind of see, review back to the news group just to see when I may have got it or who I may have even got it from. But that's a good overview of the NCR 3421 model. And if you like this video, click on that like button. By all means, go through and subscribe to my channel. Invite any friends that may be interested in this kind of stuff. We've deviated off the IBM brand in this instance for going over these NCR systems, but they're Microchannel. And I have other brands of systems that are Microchannel other than IBM and NCR. So those will come through with time. I've got even replacement planers and stuff like that of notably from like the Reply brand that I've got separate that we'll be going over as well in due time. There's just so much content that I can do. And I just wanted to go through a quick video. I thought it'd be better prepared to get that real-time clock module. I had the system fired up, and then I figured, I'm stuck. I can't create that diskette, so here we are. But later video. So subscribe, and I'll get that to it. Get to that video when I can. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.